the fastest runners in the world run somewhere between 22 and 25 miles per hour. The world record holder is Usain Bolt. He's obviously a world-class runner, but he holds the world record for sprinting at 27.72 miles per hour. I don't know if anybody in here can run that fast. That's pretty fast. Now, the average bear runs between 35 and 40 miles per hour, which means that if a bear decides to give chase, not even the fastest man in the world can outrun a bear. So you probably heard that adage that to get away from a bear, you don't need to be the fastest person in the world. You just need to be faster than the person you're with. So I think there's a lesson there about being aware of who you're traveling with, and that maybe they're a little bit slower than you. But life is often like this. As we prepare, we're getting ready for a new year of ministry, and we begin today a sermon series I've entitled Better. Because we're told from an early age that we are called to be the best. We're to do the best service, have the best product, be the best player. Whatever you do, be the best. But the problem very often with that is what we find is once you're the best, the incentive to learn very often is lost. The incentive to improve can wane. Quite frankly, maybe this is one of the reasons why younger people are abandoning the church. There's no competition or objective measure to be the best. But as Pastor Kathy shared so well last week, being a Christian is about sharing good news. And the good news is that Jesus never called us to be the best, but to be better. The author, Simon Sinek, points out that the standard of better keeps us on our toes. Thinking about better actually prompts us to keep learning, to keep improving, because we know there's always room for improvement. Someday, someone will come along and do better than Usain Bolt. So since we're in the midst of the baseball playoffs, I thought this was a good place to begin. You may be familiar with the tradition of the first pitch. The home team will line somebody up to throw out the first pitch of the game. Now, there's a short video here I want to share with you. Here are two people throwing out the first pitch with very different results. I want to introduce you to Agnes and a man named Curtis Jackson.
How about Agnes McKee, 105 years old. She's got the old school windup.
Yeah, she's cranking it up. It goes underhand, and what a great moment. 105 years old. Thank you very much for being a fan. And the first pitch ceremony. Outstanding moment today.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And she got it to Renee Rivera. Nice job of winding up. Hey, that's how they used to do it.
That's
and,
awesome.
She got the ball out there, and a wonderful moment just a few minutes ago here at Petco Park.
Well, that is 50 cents. Curtis Jackson. And his first pitch was not great. Just a bit outside. What can you say? Think he opened up a little early?
Yeah.
Look at that front shoulder.
It's good. He never had a choice between playing for the Mets or being a rapper. So.
I love that line. He never had a choice between being a rapper and pitching for the New York Mets. But now the difference is, if you don't already know, is that Agnes practiced. And I'm not saying that because we saw what she did, because in follow-up interviews, Agnes's neighbor who was with her told a reporter that, oh yeah, Agnes practiced that pitch for weeks. And a few minutes after this event, Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, told a reporter, he said, well, I guess I should have practiced. So what the question for us is, what are you practicing? We just concluded a 5-week series on essential Christianity, the practices of worship and learning and serving and giving and sharing. I'd love for you to have these memorized in the same way that there are 6 ways. There are 5 ways. But these essential practices don't make any of us perfect. But when we practice them consistently, what we find is we do get better. How can we be better at not only these practices, but how do we get better in such a way that we do a better job of serving our neighbors? That we're better at serving our community. There's something born into our souls. There's a burning desire to be better. And even Jesus admits, he says there's no shortcuts. Here's what it takes. It takes commitment. It takes flexibility. And yes, it takes practice. If you're a college football fan, I think we can agree that whether you're an Alabama fan or not, Nick Saban is a pretty good football coach. And he tells his players this. He says, you don't practice something until you're good at it. Practice it until it's impossible for you to do it poorly. Practice it until it's impossible for you to do it any other way but better. In the Bible, we find this word better has different connotations in the Hebrew and in the Greek. But we find that better refers to not just good or pleasant, but to differ from, to be more. And I love this, to make matter. The writer of Psalm 16 sought better, not for his own good, but because life, we find, is better when you live under the counsel of God. Did you catch this? He writes, I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. I love this concept. It's not God who blesses me. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. I keep the Lord always before me because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Today we heard the first half of a very popular story. Even people who are not Christians have heard reference to this story of the feeding of the 5,000. And it's a great story. It's a great miracle that Jesus performed. Feeding actually more than 5,000 people. It's estimated there were closer to 12 or 13,000 people there. With 5 loaves and 2 fish. But what if? What if the miracle is not really the point of the story? If the miracle of feeding that many people with that much food is what you take away from it, we're missing out on the best part of this story. In other words, there just may be a better story here that we need to pay attention to. It's a turning point in Jesus' ministry and in the life of the disciples. It doesn't take long to set up. As Terry shared, Jesus has just learned that his cousin and his pastor, John the Baptist, is dead. So Jesus does what we would do in similar circumstances. We would want to get away. We would want to get by ourselves. We need room to grieve. We need room to reflect. So Jesus, we're told, went off to a deserted place by himself. But Matthew reports that the people knew where he was, and they went to that deserted place. And when Jesus saw the large crowd, this is incredible, he had compassion on them and cured their sick. In the midst of his grief, Jesus had compassion on them and cured their sick. And I think what goes untold there is that many thousands on that day came to know Jesus Christ as their Savior. But as evening comes, and evening has a habit of doing that, doesn't it? The disciples look around and they think, we got Peter, hey Peter, come here. We got an issue here. We got way too many people and not enough food. What do you think we are, Methodists? There's not enough for the 12 disciples and Jesus, much less that huge gathering. There's no way for all of these folks to be fed. So they make a very logical and good decision. They go to Jesus and say, Lord, send the crowd away so that they may go into the villages and buy some nourishment. That makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, good luck with that. I don't know if you're aware of this, but even in that time, there was no fast food row. At that time, the markets by evening were closed. They were literally going to have to go from door to door and count on the hospitality of the people. But then this happens. For Jesus and the disciples, what happens next would change everything. This is why I asked Terry to stop at verse 16. Because here I think is the whole point of the story. Jesus, already knowing the abundance that God already has for them, that nourishment from God is actually within their reach, looked at each disciple in the eye in only a way that Jesus could do. Jesus can look across them, but for the disciples, he's looking at each one of them. And he uses words that had to frighten them, that had to surprise them. Why? Because they're frightening, they're surprising to us. He looks at them and looks at us and says, you give them something to eat. Are you kidding me? See, here's the real miracle. The real key to the miracle that comes next is found in these words. It's not a question. It's not a request. It is an expectation. What the disciples saw as just enough for themselves, Jesus said, you can do better. And part of that doing better is to trust Jesus with what we have. In John 14, we have the final discourse of Jesus, his final words. And he says something very powerful to the disciples. He says, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. And in fact, will do greater things. In other words, do better. We'll do better than these because I'm going to the Father. Jesus does not leave us alone. Jesus does not leave us without resources. Do you want to know why these essential practices that we've been going over the last 5 weeks of worship and learning and serving and giving and sharing, do you know why they matter so much? Because we live in a time and a culture where people are spiritually starved but on information overload. We live in a culture defined by anger and division because people are feeding their minds with theories but are starving their souls. And so, church, this is our calling, our responsibility to trust better, to be better, to do better, to give them something to eat. While the disciples were concerned about the crowd's well-being, they looked at their own resources and decided on their own it's just not enough. How many times do we look at our resources and say, it's just not enough? Jesus said this. He said that later he would say, I came that you would have life and have it what? Have it abundantly. Andy Stanley is often quoted here. This is one of his most famous tweets. He says, following Jesus will make your life better and will make you better at life. And I don't disagree with that. That's a great quote. And it's a true quote. But there's a risk inherent here that the issue of abundant life and being better at life is about my abundance and my better life. But when we take a new look at the gospel, when we read the stories of Jesus in this new light, and we take these stories to heart, what we learn is that our primary task as Jesus followers is not a better, more abundant life for ourselves. When Jesus said, you give them something to eat, he flipped the imperative. He changed expectation. And so our primary task, our primary purpose, our primary ministry is actually to ensure this more abundant life, this better life, not for us, but primarily for others. For them. And what we find is, when we focus on better for others, better for ourselves always takes care of itself. Remember, I used this verse a few weeks ago from Mark 10. Jesus said this, whoever wants to become great among you must first be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be slave to all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to what? Serve. Jesus still has this ability to look each of us in the eye, no matter where we are. Years ago, in a little sanctuary in Bremen, it's still there, but it's a painting of Jesus. When I first got there, they said, one of the amazing things about this painting is no matter where you're standing, or no matter where you're sitting, in the balcony or in the corners, no matter where you're at, Jesus is looking at you. And one quiet day, I went into the sanctuary and I found out that was true. I tried to, no matter where I went in that room, whether over here or over there, up in the balcony and over there, holy cow. It's really true. Jesus is still watching. Jesus looks us in the eye and says, you have precisely what you need to do all that I've called you to do. You give them something to eat. When the hungry come looking for just a bit to eat. When the grieving come looking for understanding and reassurance. When the lost come looking for new direction. When the weak come looking for strength. When the angry and resentful come looking for peace. When those living in fear come looking for just a little bit of courage. When the addicted come looking for freedom. When the hopeless come looking for hope. Jesus still expects us to give them something to eat. Because Because Jesus promises this again and again. I have something better planned for you.